I was curled up on the couch, laptop balanced on a stack of cushions, the glow of the screen softening the dim light of my living room. My in-laws smiled back at me, warm and gentle as always, asking about the garden, the weather, and those little details that keep a family close. I kept my voice steady, cheerful even, because I never wanted them to sense the storm inside me. They adored me, and I owed them that kindness. Then, right on cue, Mark's face popped up, charming, casual, acting as if his so-called business trip was nothing out of the ordinary. We slipped into small talk so easily, the kind couples are trained to perform. He teased about missing my cooking, complained about long meetings, even joked about how sterile hotel rooms felt. I laughed along, just enough to sell the part. But while my lips moved, my heart stayed still, heavy with suspicion. For weeks, my gut had been telling me these trips were about more than work. And just as I was starting to wonder if my instincts were failing me, something shifted in the background of his screen. A shadow moved, catching the corner of my eye. My breath hitched as the blur sharpened into a woman, young, carefree, completely unaware of the dagger she'd just driven through me. She walked past him, wearing a shirt I knew by heart. Mine. Faded cotton, neckline stretched from years of wear, something I thought I'd tossed away but never truly let go of. And there it was, draped over her body. My stomach turned cold, but my lips didn't betray me. I smiled at his parents, steady and polite, as if nothing at all had shattered inside me. My heart was pounding so loudly I was afraid the microphone might pick it up. I forced myself to nod at his words, to laugh at his father's little jokes, to pretend this was just another family call. But inside, I was unraveling thread by thread. Every second that woman's image burned into my mind, the shirt clinging to her frame, the ease with which she moved through his space. It was no accident, no misunderstanding. It was confirmation of what I had dreaded for too long. I wanted to scream, to ask him right there who she was, to let his parents see the truth of their son. But I didn't. Instead, I swallowed the ache, smoothing my voice so it never wavered. I knew how to play this part, silent, composed, the loyal wife who could make even betrayal look invisible. It wasn't weakness, it was strategy. He thought he was clever, staging this charade of business meetings and flights, but he had no idea the curtain had just been pulled back. When the call finally ended, I closed the laptop slowly, like it was fragile glass. My hands trembled as I pressed the lid down, but my face remained calm, even serene. The silence of the living room wrapped around me, almost too heavy to breathe in. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the blank screen, knowing life as I'd known it had just cracked open. I wasn't broken, not yet, but something inside me shifted, a quiet fire starting to burn, one that would not go out easily. I stood up and paced the room, my bare feet pressing against the cool wooden floor. Every step echoed like a reminder. This was real, not some cruel trick of the mind. I could still see her shape moving behind him, casual, comfortable, as if she belonged there. And that shirt, my shirt, clung to her body like proof I could never unsee. It was more than betrayal. It was invasion, as if pieces of me had been stolen and paraded in front of my eyes. My chest tightened with the weight of it all, but strangely, no tears came. Not yet. The shock was too sharp, slicing through me, leaving me cold and steady. Instead of collapsing, I straightened my back, almost surprising myself with the calm settling over me. I realized something in that moment. He thought I was blind, that I was naive enough to swallow his stories. But now, I had the truth. And the truth was power. I leaned against the window, staring out at the night sky, letting the silence seep in. The world outside was calm, unaware that mine had just shifted forever. I whispered to myself, barely audible, "It's real. He's not who he pretends to be." And with that, I knew my role had changed. I would no longer be the woman waiting for his return with hope. No, I would be the woman behind the screen who saw everything. And soon I would decide what to do with that truth. After the call ended, I couldn't stop replaying that moment in my mind. The shirt, the ease in her stride, the way Mark never flinched. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a coincidence. My gut had screamed for weeks, and now it had a face. But instead of collapsing into tears, I reached for something stronger. Clarity. If he thought I'd fall apart, he was wrong. I decided right then that silence would be my weapon. I opened his credit card statements, scrolling line by line, my pulse quickening with every new charge. Restaurants I'd never stepped into. Hotels booked on nights he swore he was working late. Charges in cities that didn't match his schedule. The pieces fit together too perfectly. Each receipt another nail in the coffin of his lies. My stomach tightened, but my eyes stayed sharp, collecting what I needed. Pain became fuel, turning me into someone he didn't know I could be. He came home later that week, smiling as if nothing had shifted, kissing me on the cheek like he always did. I smiled back, even leaned into his touch, though every fiber in me wanted to recoil. He thought he was safe. He thought I hadn't noticed. But beneath that smile, I was already building something he couldn't see. A quiet fortress of truth, ready for the day it would all come crashing down. At night, when the house was quiet and Mark's breathing grew heavy beside me, I would lie awake, the glow of my phone lighting my face as I dug deeper. Airline tickets that didn't match his meetings, dinners for two when he claimed to be dining alone, small luxuries charged in cities he barely mentioned. Every discovery tightened the knot in my chest, but it also sharpened my focus. Each lie documented, each detail saved. I wasn't just a wife betrayed. I was becoming my own investigator. The strange part was how calm I felt. There were no screaming matches, no slammed doors, no pleading questions. I'd seen too many women lose themselves in hysteria, while the man stood there, smug, weaponizing their tears. Not me. My silence unnerved him, though he didn't know why yet. I gave him nothing to suspect, nothing to fear. Just the same warm tone, the same daily rituals, the same careful smile. In truth, I was watching him like a hawk. Every excuse, every casual shrug, every phone call he took in another room. Each was logged in my mind like evidence stored in a vault. He believed he had fooled me, but the irony was delicious. The more he lied, the more power he unknowingly handed me. And little by little, my patience grew into something far stronger than rage. It grew into a plan. I started saving everything. Screenshots of charges, copies of itineraries, even the way his voice sounded too rehearsed when he said he missed me. My phone became a vault, each file tucked away like a secret weapon. There was a certain power in holding it all silently, watching him weave lies with the same lips he used to kiss my forehead. Every time he thought he was clever, I felt myself grow steadier, stronger, almost untouchable. When friends asked how I was, I smiled and nodded, offering the usual lines about being busy or tired. No one knew what was simmering beneath the surface. And that was exactly how I wanted it. My pain stayed hidden, folded neatly behind small talk and polite laughter, while my mind worked like a chess player's, mapping out the next move long before the pieces shifted. He had no idea he wasn't the one in control anymore. I'd look at him across the dinner table, watching how he avoided my eyes when his phone buzzed, how he chewed slower when he was hiding something. He believed he was safe, but I had already stepped out of the role he wrote for me. I wasn't the trusting wife anymore. I was something else entirely, someone patient enough to wait, to collect, to strike when the moment would matter most. The morning I walked into my lawyer's office, I carried myself differently. Not as a broken wife, but as a woman armed with knowledge. The space smelled faintly of leather and paper. the kind of scent that lingers in rooms where secrets turn into strategy. I laid out the receipts, the screenshots, the recordings, pieces of my heartbreak spread neatly across his desk. My lawyer's eyes flicked over them, sharp and measured, and then he leaned back with a small nod. "There's enough here," he said, his tone calm but certain. My heart skipped, but I stayed still, hands folded in my lap. He reminded me of the clause in our prenup, the one I had almost forgotten, the no infidelity clause. At the time, it had felt like a formality, something tucked away like an old umbrella you never expect to use. But now, it was the lifeline I hadn't known I'd need. Infidelity would shift everything, assets, property, security, into my name. His advice was simple: collect more. Every detail mattered. Every careless move Mark made could tighten the rope around his lies. I nodded slowly, feeling both the sting of betrayal and the strange relief of having a path forward. I walked out of that office with my documents tucked under my arm, the sun hitting my face like a spotlight. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. I wasn't just enduring anymore, I was preparing. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. Every click of the mouse felt like a hammer striking the foundation of his lies. Hotel confirmations, restaurant bills, even the timestamps on his flight bookings. I gathered them all. It was meticulous, almost clinical, but beneath that discipline pulsed something fierce. Each file saved wasn't just evidence. It was a piece of my freedom being built, brick by brick. Mark moved around the house, whistling like a man who thought he had fooled the world. He kissed me on the cheek before bed, his lips brushing my skin with the same routine affection. But I felt nothing. Not anger, not longing, just distance. It was almost as if he were a stranger sleeping beside me, one I had already started to outmaneuver without his knowledge. His false confidence only made my silence feel sharper. And the calmer I became, the stronger I felt. He believed my patience was ignorance, that my quiet was submission. But every word he lied, every alibi he spun, was another rope he wrapped around himself. I didn't need to fight him head-on. I just needed to wait, to keep building, to let him tighten the knot until he had no way out. Sometimes I would catch myself watching him with a strange detachment, almost as if I were studying a character in a play. His gestures, his smiles, his excuses, they were rehearsed lines, and I knew the script better than he did. What he didn't know was that the audience, me, wasn't buying it anymore. I was sitting front row, quietly collecting proof of every false act he performed. And soon, that act would collapse under its own weight. The more evidence I secured, the lighter I felt. It was ironic. His betrayal, which should have crushed me, was giving me a new kind of strength. My lawyer's words echoed in my mind. "You already hold the power." And I could feel it, growing each day. Mark thought my silence meant blindness, but in reality, it was the calm before a storm he couldn't imagine. Late one evening, as I tucked another screenshot into my folder, I whispered to myself, "Almost there." It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming everything I had given, everything he had taken for granted. And deep down I knew, when the truth finally came crashing down, it would not be me left in ruins. The night he walked through the front door, I knew something had shifted. Mark carried himself with that smug ease, the kind of swagger a man wears when he thinks he's untouchable. His jacket was slung over his shoulder, his smile wide, like he was stepping into a home that belonged to him alone. He kissed me quickly, already loosening his tie, already expecting dinner, comfort, devotion. But what he didn't know was that this time, I wasn't waiting for him with blind loyalty. I was waiting with proof. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing. The table was set, not with food, but with papers, screenshots neatly stacked, receipts aligned, the video clip saved and ready. And sitting across from me was my lawyer, calm and collected, his briefcase resting on the chair beside him. The air in the house was thick with silence, the kind that doesn't just fill a room but suffocates it. When Mark finally noticed, his smile faltered. He looked at the table, then at me, confusion flickering into unease. "What's all this?" he asked, trying to mask it with a laugh. But I didn't answer. I just leaned back in my chair, eyes steady on his face, letting him realize that the performance was over. For once, I didn't need to raise my voice. The truth was sitting right there, waiting to strip away every ounce of his confidence. My lawyer was the first to speak. His voice was calm, almost casual, but every word landed like a hammer. "Mr. Reynolds, this is everything we need." He tapped the stack of papers, then turned his eyes back to Mark. I watched the color drain from my husband's face, the way his bravado cracked in slow motion. He tried to laugh it off, muttering something about misunderstandings, but the evidence left no room for denial. Then came the video, the recording of that family call, where the young woman walked casually behind him in my shirt. I pressed play, and the silence in the room deepened. There was no denying what we were all seeing. His lips parted, searching for words, but none came. That shirt had become the final nail, the one piece of proof that spoke louder than any confession ever could. He stammered, desperate to claw back some control. "Emily, you've got it wrong. She's just—" But I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. My lawyer pointed to the clause in the prenup, his finger steady on the line that shifted everything to me if infidelity was proven. And in that moment, the man who thought he owned the world realized he had just lost it. All of it. I sat perfectly still, watching him crumble. His shoulders slumped, his voice cracked, and for the first time in years, Mark looked small. He wasn't the confident husband who strutted out the door for business trips. He was just a man exposed, cornered by his own arrogance. The silence stretched between us, heavy and deliberate. I didn't need to shout or cry. My quiet gaze said everything. The lawyer gathered the papers into his briefcase with precision, like the closing act of a play that had gone exactly as rehearsed. Mark's eyes darted from him to me, searching for some trace of mercy, but I had none to give. Mercy was what I had offered all these years, and he had squandered it. Now all that remained was consequence. When the front door finally shut behind my lawyer, I turned my eyes back to Mark. He tried again, softer this time, calling my name like it might undo the damage. But I simply rose from my chair, pushing it in quietly. "It's done," I told him, my voice steady. "There's nothing left to explain." And in that stillness, I knew. His life had just shifted, and there was no path back. The day the movers arrived, I stood by the window with my arms folded, watching them carry box after box of his life out the front door. The thud of furniture against the truck, the scrape of cardboard across the floor. It was the soundtrack of an ending. Neighbors slowed their walks, pretending not to stare, but I could feel their eyes. And there was Mark, hovering helplessly, pleading under his breath, as if words could stitch back what he had torn apart. I didn't answer him. I didn't even meet his eyes. My silence cut deeper than any argument could. For years I had given him my voice, my patience, my trust. Now I gave him nothing. Every time he reached for me, every time his hand lifted in some desperate gesture, I let the space between us stay empty. That emptiness was his to carry now, not mine. The house felt different already, lighter, freer, almost mine again. The walls that had once echoed with lies now stood witness to justice. He looked around as if searching for something to hold on to, but there was nothing left for him here. This home, this life, this security, all of it was slipping through his fingers, and the most painful part for him was that I didn't even have to raise my voice to take it back. I could hear him calling my name as the last of his belongings were carried out, but his voice sounded distant, almost irrelevant. Once, that sound could stop me in my tracks. Now, it was nothing more than background noise, like the creak of the moving truck's ramp or the shuffle of cardboard boxes against the pavement. I didn't even flinch. My silence was deliberate, and in that silence, he finally seemed to grasp the weight of his own downfall. The irony wasn't lost on me. He had thought control came from lies, from sneaking around, from living two lives at once. But real control had been mine all along, in my patience, in my quiet gathering of truth, in my refusal to break when he expected me to. Every sigh, every shake of his head, every desperate plea was proof that the tables had turned, and he was powerless to stop it. Neighbors lingered longer now, watching from their porches, pretending to busy themselves with small tasks while their eyes tracked the scene. I let them watch. Let them see the man who had once strutted around this street now reduced to a figure of pity. And me? I stood tall in the doorway, not gloating, not raging, simply present. My silence was my victory, and the whole world could see it. When the truck finally pulled away, the street fell quiet. Mark stood at the edge of the driveway, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. For a moment, he looked like a man trying to wake from a nightmare, only to realize it was real. I didn't wave. I didn't acknowledge him at all. I simply turned, stepped back inside, and closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking into place felt like the final word in a story I had already finished. Inside, I breathed in the silence. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence I had lived with for months, filled with suspicion and doubt. This silence was different. It was clean, peaceful, mine. The walls seemed to exhale with me, as if the house itself was relieved to be free of him. I ran my hand along the hallway table, steady and calm, feeling the solid truth that everything here now belonged to me, legally, emotionally, entirely. Revenge hadn't needed screaming or chaos. It had needed patience, strategy, and quiet resolve. And in the end, the law had spoken louder than any argument ever could. I walked through the rooms with a new sense of ownership, not just of the house, but of myself. He was gone. I was whole. And in the silence he left behind, I finally found peace.